When life knocks you down, life has a way of testing us in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes the blows come slowly, like rain dripping into a cracked roof until the whole structure collapses. Other times they come suddenly, like a storm that rips through the calmest of seas. For Daniel Reyes, life didn't just knock him down, it slammed him, dragged him, and left him wondering if he would ever stand again. But this is not a story of defeat. It is a story of rising, of resilience, of finding strength in the ashes when everything seemed lost. Daniel grew up in a modest town on the outskirts of Manila. His father was a tricycle driver, his mother a market vendor, and together they did their best to raise 3 children. Life was hard, but Daniel's parents had one constant dream, that their children would live better lives than they did. Daniel, being the eldest, carried the weight of that dream on his shoulders. He studied hard, often by the dim light of a single bulb, and he worked odd jobs to help his family make ends meet. By sheer determination, Daniel made it to university with a scholarship. It was the proudest moment of his parents' lives when they saw him walk across the stage in a borrowed suit, his name called as a graduate of civil engineering. That day, Daniel believed he was finally standing on the threshold of a brighter tomorrow. But life is never that simple. After graduation, Daniel struggled to find stable work. The economy was down, opportunities were scarce, and every interview ended the same way. "We'll call you." Months turned into a year. His savings ran dry, his family's hopes dimmed, and the weight of responsibility pressed harder. To help, Daniel took construction jobs under the scorching sun, mixing cement and hauling steel, often being paid less than he was promised. Still, he pushed on. Then one night, a phone call changed everything. His father had been in an accident, his tricycle hit by a reckless truck driver. The hospital bills piled up faster than Daniel could count. His mother borrowed from loan sharks just to keep the doctors working. Daniel sold his few possessions and even stopped eating properly to save money for medicines. Despite it all, his father passed away 2 weeks later. The funeral was a blur of tears, prayers, and unanswered questions. Daniel felt crushed under the guilt of not being able to do more. He replayed every decision he had made, asking himself if he could have prevented the tragedy somehow. But guilt is a cruel companion. It clings even when you know deep inside that the blame is not yours to bear. After his father's death, Daniel became the family's breadwinner. His mother's health began to fail, and his younger siblings looked to him for guidance. Every day was a battle between despair and duty. He woke at dawn to work at construction sites, returned home late, and spent what little energy he had tutoring his siblings so they wouldn't fall behind in school. It was during this time that Daniel learned the hardest lesson. When life knocks you down, it doesn't always wait for you to get back up before it strikes again. One rainy evening, as he walked home from work, exhausted and drenched, Daniel collapsed in the middle of the street. A passerby helped him up and rushed him to a clinic where the doctor delivered yet another blow. Malnutrition, exhaustion, and stress were destroying his body. If he didn't slow down, he might not live to see 30. That night, lying on a thin hospital bed, Daniel stared at the ceiling and thought about giving up. What was the point of trying if every effort ended in pain? Why fight so hard when the world seemed intent on crushing him? But then he remembered his father's words. Years ago, when Daniel was still a boy, his father had told him, "A knock life will hit you hard, but you don't measure a man by how many times he falls. You measure him by how many times he stands again." Those words, simple yet powerful, echoed in Daniel's mind like a lifeline. And so he decided he would stand again. Daniel began rebuilding not with money, but with mindset. He read books on resilience, borrowed from the local library. He started exercising, even if just a few push-ups each morning. He learned to eat better, even with limited means, by choosing healthier food instead of cheap junk. Slowly, he regained his strength. But more than his body, Daniel rebuilt his dreams. He realized that waiting for opportunities wasn't enough. He had to create them. With the little money he had saved, he bought second-hand tools and began offering small engineering services, fixing roofs, repairing fences, helping neighbors with construction plans. Word spread. People admired not just his skill, but his honesty and persistence. One day, a retired contractor noticed Daniel's work and offered him a partnership for small housing projects. At first, Daniel was hesitant. He feared failing again, feared letting people down. But he remembered that staying down was worse than falling, so he agreed. It wasn't easy. There were days when projects failed, when payments were delayed, when storms destroyed weeks of labor. There were nights he cried silently, feeling like life was laughing at him. But every morning, he chose to rise. Every time he was knocked down, he stood again, sometimes shakily, sometimes with tears, but always with determination. Years passed, and the small projects grew bigger. Daniel eventually built his own construction company, one that not only gave him stability, but also provided jobs to men who, like him, had once been overlooked and broken by life. He became known not just as an engineer, but as a man who never gave up. His siblings finished school. One became a teacher, the other a nurse. His mother, though frail, lived to see her children thrive. And Daniel, the boy who once collapsed from exhaustion, became a living testament to resilience. Looking back, he realized something profound. Life doesn't knock you down to destroy you. It knocks you down to teach you how strong you really are. Each fall had carved wisdom into his soul. Each wound had made him kinder, more compassionate. Each failure had pushed him toward a future he never imagined possible. And so Daniel began sharing his story. He visited schools, spoke at barangay gatherings, and told young people, "You will fall. You will fail. But remember this, your scars are proof that you fought. Don't be ashamed of them. Wear them like armor. Because every time life knocks you down, you have the power to rise stronger than before." The crowd would always fall silent, some wiping tears, others nodding in recognition of their own battles. For Daniel's story was not just his. It was the story of anyone who had ever been broken, anyone who had ever thought they couldn't go on. And that is why his life became more than just survival. It became a beacon, a reminder that when life knocks you down, it is not the end. It is the beginning of the rise. Daniel's story is a lesson for all of us. Pain will come. Struggles will find us. Loss, failure, and heartbreak are inevitable parts of life. But so too is resilience. So too is courage. So too is the quiet, stubborn will to stand back up again and again until the storm passes and the sun shines once more. When life knocks you down, you don't stay there. You rise. You rise not because it is easy, but because it is the only way forward. You rise because in every fall, there is a chance to discover your truest strength. And maybe, just maybe, when you stand again, you'll find that you are not the same person who fell. You are stronger, wiser, and braver than you ever imagined.